two qualities of energy moving without interruption through the body. As long as the dancer can keep in balance these two energies, he has a force that nothing else can give.
Good morning. Let's try that again. I gave a talk in North Carolina at a church a little while ago, and I said good morning, and they literally ate me. They ate my soul from the seats. It was such a tremendous good morning response. So let's try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, that is nice. That is nice. So the talk for today is called A Strange Light. But before I get into it, and you can kind of probably guess a little bit about what it's going to be about by my not-so-subtle graphic design up here on the screen. But before I get into it, I want to take a quick survey. How many of you have experienced an earthquake? Wow, okay, fantastic. Really, 3 days ago. So let's, for a second here, just imagine with me that, God forbid right now there's an earthquake happening. And the building is kind of shaking a little bit, and nothing bad is happening outside, just we're kind of all on edge, sort of, earthquake is happening, when it comes, you're sort of like, it's coming, and then it stops. And none of us have died, everyone's fine, but we just had that experience. What is the first thing, I want you to put yourself in this position, what is the first thing you're going to do right now? It just ended. What do you do? So, I heard a couple of you say tweet it out, right? That's the response I was hoping for. How many of you thought Facebook did? How many of you thought tweet it out, first of all? Tweet it out. Like, you guys are like immediately right to the phone, tweeting. Facebook, no Facebookers, right? And what about Instagram it? We like, you gotta think. All right, that's interesting. I just wanted to, this will wrap back into things later, but we had to do this first before I revealed anything. So there's this crazy French writer, René Dumont, and he has this great quote that says, "What is above knows what is below, but what is below does not know what is above. One climbs, one sees, one descends, one no longer sees, one sees no longer, but one has seen." Right? And I think that this quote embodies so much of what travel should mean for all of us, right? Going on trips. You go and you see things, and whether you're climbing or not climbing, and whether it's an internal trip or a physical trip to a different country, you're bringing back part of what you've seen. And how do we integrate what we've seen into our lives is sort of a question that I'm always asking myself. I travel a lot. So this year was supposed to look like this for me. It was supposed to be very predictable and simple. It was supposed to be a straight line. There weren't supposed to be any sort of chaotic moments. I was, working at a company for the first time in my life. Just a very placid existence. But already this year, it has turned into this. two massive, unexpected aberrations in travel and in life that have occurred this year to me. And so I've been thinking a lot about these experiences. And hence, it's this idea of a strange flight. You get on a plane expecting one outcome. You go on a trip expecting one outcome, and then on the return flight home, you realize you've completely changed as a person. Something inside you has shifted. And what does that mean, and how do we roll these experiences back into our work, I think is an important question. And so I had this idea, thinking about these sort of changing moments and great design being born from nourishing habits, and how can we evoke nourishing habits out of these experiences. But it's not really just great design. It could be great work, really great art, great love, great life. How are these things built from nourishing habits? I think there are 3 points that we should focus on as creators, as artists, as individuals, to get to these points, to develop these habits. One is that we should be constantly making an effort towards empathy. Constantly. This is a very simple idea, but I think it's a very powerful and important one. The second one is no dismissal. And this is the easiest one to integrate in your life. Just stop dismissing things. As large system shifts happen, so like in publishing, for instance, right now, there's a tremendous amount of change in a system that had been long established and had been sort of firmly entrenched. Everyone who's involved in that industry, and dismissing happens on both sides of the coin. There, publishers dismissing the tech advancements, and tech folks dismissing the old school publishing sort of methodology, and then a macro and micro perspective shifting. Or as our friend Milton Glasser would say, he has these wonderful 10 points about how to live your life, 10 tips for life. He says, how you live changes your brain. And that's kind of at the core of what these 3 points are about. So we have this constant effort towards empathy, no dismissal, and macro-micro perspective shifting. And if you look at the opposite of these, if you look at no empathy, and if you look at constant dismissal, and a determination to stay within your small world. If you look at that within the publishing industry, for example, you see instances across the board of dismissing advancements of where ebooks are going, dismissing the Kindle. The Kindle comes out, everyone dismisses it. That's a piece of junk. No one's going to want to read on that. You hit the next page button, and the screen flashes, and it's horrible, and it takes you out of the narrative. There are a million ways you can dismiss things. I think this is a horrible thing to do. It's a great habit to break. So the short story I'm going to tell you today is about one of those trips, one of those massive aberrations in my life that's already happened, even though 2011 is only 4 months in. 2 totally unexpected trips. And this trip started on March 10th, 2011. Started at SFO. I got the plane headed for Tokyo, Japan, Haneda Airport. Sometime over the Pacific Ocean, after we crossed the international date line, the Sendai 9.0 earthquake happened off the east coast of Japan while we were in the air. They didn't tell us that happened. They didn't make an announcement. Why would they? They would just freak us all out, and we'd be stuck, and there was no internet. We couldn't communicate with our loved ones anyway. A little bit of background, too, is that I've lived in Japan for pretty much all of my adult life. I moved there when I was 19, and I just moved back to the States last October. So Japan for me is very much a hometown. I was actually going back to pay taxes. You go back to pay taxes, you get an earthquake. And give a talk and get a haircut, which I still haven't actually fit in my schedule, and see old friends and just have some great food. That was the expectation of that trip. But when the plane started coming into Haneda, and I looked out and it was nighttime, there was sort of this view, and this isn't Tokyo, this is Blade Runner. But everyone, conflates it, right? Tokyo is the physical manifestation of Blade Runner. Everyone says this. Really, it's Hong Kong. If you really want to see Blade Runner, go to Hong Kong. But for the first time ever, the plane's coming in. I look out the window, and it's nighttime. It's like around 9 o'clock at night, and there's like flames shooting out of this thing next to the airport. And I go, that's kind of weird. I haven't seen that before. But still, like couldn't make any connections. We have no idea what's going on, and you get off the plane, and actually the plane landed, and we taxied to the gate, and they didn't make any mention. They just said, oh, the trains have stopped. And if you want to take your blanket with you, you can. Because like, it's the grossest thing in the world, right? The blanket there. No, I'm not going to take my blanket. So what had happened actually, and you know, I didn't realize this, none of us realized this. We get off the plane and none of the moving walkways are moving. That's another strange thing, but all these signs meant nothing because we had no context. And I get off, you get through customs, you go through immigration, you go through customs. And this is the scene that greeted us when we got out into the airport. I was traveling alone at the time. So this is just me getting into Haneda Airport, and just hundreds of people camped out in the airport. And there's no chaos. You know, people didn't seem really frightened, or you know, Japanese people are wonderful. They are tremendously stoic, and everyone's just set up like they're having a little party, drinking beer, taking a nap, whatever. You know, there's nothing we could do. The trains had stopped. But when you live in Tokyo, you experience earthquakes all the time, and trains stop from time to time, so you don't think anything of it. And I remember, still, I knew nothing of what had happened. I didn't know a 9.0 earthquake had happened. And the first thing I did, actually, was I tweeted out, or I thought I tweeted out, but a guy kept my foot out of my mouth. I tweeted, wow, I wonder if the big one's coming. Right? So that's how little context we had getting off the plane and into the airport. So still didn't know what was going on. So the first thing I did was I went to Twitter. You go to Twitter, you go to check Twitter. Couldn't make any phone calls because all the lines were jammed. Too many people making calls, couldn't contact any of my friends. The data networks were also extremely taxed. So Twitter actually was about the only thing we could get information from because it's such a small amount of data to send the text packets. So what I did was I used it as kind of a time machine because I couldn't look at CNN, I couldn't look at New York Times, couldn't look at Japan Times, couldn't read any of the local internet newspapers. So I used it as a time machine. And really, this is such a powerful tool. Twitter, we all make fun of and say, I'm eating my sandwich, you know, it's for telling about Kanye West, tweeting about fashion. But this ability for Twitter to become this time machine, which places you into someone else's mind and gives you a first-person perspective on their experience, especially in an event like this, is phenomenal. So I went back and let's step through the earthquake with a couple of my friends. So kind of an amazing thing to be able to do this. So my friend, again, the earthquake happened at 2:46 actually, and 2:47 again writes quack. And then he corrects it, he writes quake. And then he writes a minute later, long quake. And then a minute after that, big quake. And then after quakes, a few minutes after that. And then longest, strongest quake I've felt in 8 years. Another friend of mine writes, when an earthquake moves a printer across the room and knocks down IMAX, it's a bit scary. We're all waiting outside the office now. This is a few minutes after Gen's last post. And then a few minutes later, Tokyo looks okay so far. Miyagi sounds bad though. More aftershocks. Everyone is being led to the ground floor now. After Quake 2 at the Tokyo airport. This is another friend of mine in Tokyo. A little bit after that, we're all fine. Some computers might be dead though. The printer took quite a hike. Kenichi hears that Tokyo Disneyland right on Tokyo Bay is beginning to get flooded. This is freaky stuff. I don't like it one bit. Whole telephone network was down. Twitter, the only way to communicate. More aftershocks, feeling seasick. Twitter. Everyone went to Twitter, right? This was the place where these moments were captured, where you guys also said you would go to Twitter if something happened. I get goosebumps stepping back through this timeline with these people. It's a tremendous thing. It's a tremendous thing, and it's something I think that is worth exploring why we do that, why we use Twitter in this way. Not Facebook, not Instagram apparently, but Twitter. Why Twitter? You know, there's like the Kindle, and I say, you know, I bring up the Kindle as something that was dismissed because I think the Kindle is one of the most amazing technologies out there right now. It's this beautiful, quiet technology that evokes, you know, something that most technologies don't evoke, which is a calm, right? And there's something about Twitter that, you know, embedded in the very fabric of Twitter, there's this quietness that can't be replicated in like a subview of Facebook. You can do status updates on Facebook. but they're not really the same as doing stats. The quietness of Twitter is different, if that makes any sense. It's focused, right? Twitter is very focused. You have one task when you're in Twitter, when you're engaging Twitter. It's lightweight, both in terms of data and in terms of interface. It's efficient, which is a product of being focused and lightweight. And it's a near perfect delivery mechanism for on-the-ground, first-person reportage. That's the Twitter app. I think in the iPhone is a great example if you compare it to like the Facebook app. You can get in the Twitter app, you tweet, you get out in a matter of seconds. The Facebook app, you go in, you have to kind of click on a menu and then find a thing, and there's like 50 other things, and then there's like status updates popping up, and you actually want to read what Mark Zuckerberg just commented on, and there's all this kind of friction between you and just kind of reporting something. So I think it's a phenomenal thing, and there's actually two Twitters, right? There's really two Twitters out there, possibly more, but two main Twitters. Number one, the micro-curatorial Twitter, which companies like Flipboard, for example, sort of build products around. Where we're using the stream as a way of sort of saying, this is interesting, check this out, look at this, look at this. And then there's the reportage tool, which brings to light this kind of issue that Twitter has right now, which is, for me to get those tweets, it was tremendously difficult for me to go back and pull those tweets out from the stock, from my friend's timeline. Go and try to pull tweets out from a month ago, or 2 months ago. Try to do it in a way that scales. It took me over an hour, I think, to get like these 15. I would have loved to have done more, but it was arduous, that task. And I think that there may be some sort of almost moral obligation for Twitter to, if not provide an interface to accessing this kind of information, this kind of reportage, then certainly Twitter itself, it would be an amazing addition, I think, to the ecosystem, to be pulling out and highlighting these sorts of clumps of data. And if you look at what I was doing, I mean, if we imagine this to be the Twitter timeline for that day, for March 11th, I was going through and I was trying to find my friends and clumps of data that my friends had posted, and taking all this and aggregating it into my own sort of mini narrative storyline from that day, from 2:30 p.m. until 5 p.m. effectively. And this is when Twitter really shone over there in Japan on this really micro perspective level. Of being able to get this hyper-granular sense of what had happened that day. But then a shift occurred within Twitter, and this is, I think, also really important to understand, is that Twitter was great, it's phenomenal for these first-person perspectives, but Twitter became this sort of weird, conspiratorial, and like overly emotional echo chamber for misinformation. As soon as the reportage ended, we were all just trying to figure out what was going on. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, after the quake, all the nuclear stuff started to happen. The meltdown started to occur up in Fukushima. And no one knew really what was going to come of that. And on Twitter's, take iodine and start eating iodine to preemptively protect your thyroid and make sure you have an umbrella, don't get hit by the rain, it's radioactive rain. And it devolved into like living inside of Ted Kaczynski's brain. It's like everyone was out to get us. The government was lying. It was extremely stressful, tremendously stressful, actually. And Facebook, in turn, became this nourishing and connective tissue between families and people. It was very interesting to see that shift happen. All of my friends' families would post updates. We're fine. Here are the kids. We went to grandma's house in the countryside. We're out of Tokyo, and you can see people follow up. Those families back home follow up, and it was amazing to see this extremely distinct separation of use cases for these two, sometimes often clumped together services. And then, of course, being over there and watching the news, there's all these news visualizations, and there's your standard visualizations that are beautiful and sort of like, this is what the tsunami looked like, this is how large the peaks were as it spread out from the epicenter. But there are also other visualizations which were chilling, and I'm going to show you a time lapse of that this website, JapanQuakeMap.org, has. So this is a time lapse of March 11th, of quake activity in Japan, March 11th. And you can watch, it's hard to see, but there's a time marker. So it's 5:30 in the morning right now, 6 in the morning. The quake happened at 2:47 in the afternoon, 2:46. It's 8 a.m. You can see there's a little bit of activity, but in Japan, every day there's a little bit of activity. It's 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning. Even this build-up, this pause before the data is ripping. It's 2 p.m. and then it hits. And it just sets off dozens, hundreds of other quakes. It's 6 p.m. now, 7 p.m. My plane is getting closer. It's kind of amazing that they even had this land when you look at this and you realize how much sort of geological activity was happening underneath. It's 10 p.m. I'm at the airport now, and this is going on underneath the country. 3 or 4 days into it, I must have felt 20 or 30 quakes, and every night you're being woken up 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night because there's 5.0 quakes, 4.0 quakes shaking your house. But this kind of visualization, there's something tremendously powerful about this. I still get goosebumps whenever I watch that, when that first one hits and you see the chain reaction it sets off. As designers, I mean, this is the sort of power that we can evoke from properly displaying and presenting this data and bringing people closer to that experience. None of you have experienced, you weren't there, but I'm sure you felt something looking at this. And then, of course, there are the other visualizations, like the New York Times did about the reactors, and we all became kind of nuclear specialists as this thing unfolded. But there's also a failure of apathy that happened in this event, in the visualizations. Some of them, I felt. And another one, actually, I don't need to keep bringing up New York Times, but they have such a great database department over there, that they had this one visualization that was before and after satellite photos of the areas that were hit. And there was something crass about the interaction model where you swipe across the landscape and you destroy the landscape as you come in. And it just felt not right. And I don't know what the right model was for this, but to me there was something swiping back and forth and seeing this destruction, and you kind of being the one doing it was just, it was wrong. It wasn't the right way to present that data. And so then there's perspective. I had that kind of micro perspective being in Tokyo, and then I wanted to take a slightly mid-macro perspective where I was so stressed out in Japan. Actually, I was so stressed out in Tokyo by Monday. I didn't realize it. But I was having panic attacks. I couldn't breathe because all of the foreign media was saying like the world is ending, and then all the Japanese were just completely stoic and going on about their lives. And I was like, do I have? It's like a secret that no one around you knows. And you're kind of like going mad. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to Kyoto, try to like relax and see. Let's go to Kyoto, get out of the plume of death and out of the way of the plume of death and try to get, because I didn't want to leave the country. It didn't seem right. It didn't seem right to dismiss the situation just yet. So I went to Kyoto and I checked in my hotel, and this is the view outside my hotel, which is unfortunate that it's so evocative of like a nuclear plant or something. And then it was amazing because in the city there was almost no sense of this disaster unfolding. Kyoto was going on with life. There was nothing different about it. Everyone was playing normal music. No one was talking about the earthquake. No one was talking about sort of the potential nuclear disaster. And this is a video I took. This is the only instance of my 3 days in Kyoto that I saw of people sort of proactively bringing attention to what was going on. These are monks sort of praying and asking for donations for the victims in Togo. And so then there was yet another perspective, which is this macro perspective that you got over there. And again, like the foreign and domestic press discrepancy was really, really phenomenal. It was, an exasperation of this crisis on this tremendous level. My mother's calling me, like crying, like come home, like she couldn't imagine why I would still be there. Friends emailing me, begging me to get on the next flight. All because the New York Times and Washington Post and other times, every headline was, the next Chernobyl is happening, and no one has this sense of the size of Japan or the relativity of things, and so you assume it would be like, someone in Japan calling us here in San Francisco when Katrina happened and being like, "Are you okay? Get out of there." Is the flood hitting you? It was that level of like offness, and like I said, Tokyo was so stoic. the expats were so conflicted because we had this information, we had this secret that the Japanese didn't have. The Japanese only had what the media was presenting. They can't read English. Japanese are, like, that's the one deep kind of skeleton in the closet. They can't read. They're very bad at English. They're lovely people. But they just don't. They're like, we're not going to read English. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to make amazing robots and awesome cars. English is not on our list of things to do. And the Japanese were so stoic because everyone was saying, it was a keep calm and carry on, ethos of don't, you can't abandon your hometown. And then there's this bicultural conflict that was happening, which was tremendously fascinating. Friends who were married, who had Japanese spouses, who were getting calls from their parents saying, get the hell out of there. And then their spouses' parents were saying, don't you ever look at me again if you run away. Like, you do not abandon your home. This is your home. This is our home. We do not abandon our home. We do not abandon Tokyo. You go to work. You do not run away to Hawaii for a week. It was really, really fascinating. And this sort of perspective is only visible on the ground. And I think, I was trying to soak this up as I was there. And, Japan is very much, Tokyo is very much, more than any other city, my hometown. And there's this deep conflict of how do you help? What do you do in a situation like this? And like, what is abandonment? And what is your duty? And again, in a city, in a country like Japan, you can never become a citizen, truly. You can never become a part of that country. And what is that in times like this, where it's literally a life or death situation, or feels like it? Where does that place you? Where does that place your allegiance to the sense of home? Anyway, I think a lot of foreigners were dealing with these questions, and it was a fascinating time. It was something that only could have been experienced there on the ground. And since I've come back, it's been shocking how distant I feel from all of what's happening over there. And so I had to leave. I left. It was heart-wrenching. It was horrible. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay there for another month or 2 or 3 months. I wanted to do whatever I could. I wanted to go to Tohoku. But I had to leave. I have duties over here now too. And my trip was only scheduled for that period of time. And as I'm leaving, there's this getting back to this idea of these questions of, great work is born from nourishing habits, and what was I able, did I embrace or did I experience this trip in the way I wanted to experience it? Having that constant effort towards empathy and not dismissing it. The easiest thing would have been to got back on the next plane in Haneda and just left the country. And then a macro-micro perspective of looking at things like on the micro scale, like on Twitter, understanding how those tools work on a micro perspective, and then evolve and sort of lose their efficacy on a more macro scale. But then also changing perspective within the country and also from the media perspective. And I think great designers don't turn these off. Great designers, great workers don't turn these things off. We don't turn these habits off. And so to start with a quote from a crazy Frenchman, you have to end with a quote from a crazy Frenchman. And it says, those who sleep badly seem to a greater or lesser degree guilty. What do? They make the night present, right? And what I felt when I came back, I couldn't sleep. It felt like the night and my guilt and my inability to sleep was making the earthquake present still within my life. And so I wrote an essay, which I just want to end with right now. I hope not going over too far, but time-wise. But I just want to read from this essay, which I wrote when I got back, the day after I got back from the trip, trying to parse this, trying to put this in perspective, trying to understand it, trying to understand what I just went through. 10 hours earlier, a quarter of a world away, I was sitting in Ebisu having beers, eating udon and tempura, and discussing a Japanese friend's upcoming book of poetry. It was exceedingly normal, the situation, not the poetry. Particularly normal relative to the chaotic light under which foreign media had been portraying Tokyo. Folks around us chatted. Nobody talked about the nuclear power plant. It certainly didn't feel like a panicked city. Now, standing at the airport, waiting for my bags in front of the conveyor belt, all that felt unsettlingly distant. A man next to me coughs without covering his mouth, and I laugh to myself, this is my worry now, this coughing man. Finally, my bags arrived. I grab them and walk to customs. The tiny customs guard makes a special mark on my form, and I'm sent to be inspected. My inspectress is a young Latin woman, late 20s perhaps, chatty, chubby, quintessentially American. Unprovoked, she remarks that this is her favorite arriving flight, JL002, because the Japanese are just so gosh darn polite and orderly. I flirt with her and ask, what do you think tipped him off about me nodding to the customs guard? She smiles and says, well, I'm not allowed to say. And then whispering, but it was probably the backpack. Suddenly, as if by cue, she straightens up, puts on her serious face, and asks, do you wish to change your declaration, sir? Is there anything in your bags you wish me to know about now before I open them? Yes, I want to tell her. Yes, I changed my declaration. I brought everything with me, everything. I flew to the plants, and I scooped up all the waste. It's in the back pocket, in the TSA regulation 1-quart Ziploc plastic baggie. I pulled all the poison out of the air. I drew it deep into my lungs and exhaled into my socks. My socks are full of the radiation. Don't touch the socks. I pulled the tsunami back. I drew the inland water back into the ocean. I pulled it over the rice paddies, unflattening them, the trees straightening them, a billion leaves fluttering back into position. I drew the water back. It was easy because it was what I had to do. I tell her, looking her straight in the eyes. Perhaps you don't understand, but I had to. As the water washed backwards over the town's homes were placed firmly onto the soil, the elderly were swept the opposite of a way. They're swept into their lives, onto the tatami, sipping tea, listening to the radio, getting their hair done, strolling in the beautiful early spring light, thinking about their grandchildren who were going to visit in the week of the long holiday. Old buildings were suddenly rebuilt, emerging from the wake plank by plank. You should have seen it. It was fantastic. Buses full of people rushing to escape drove skillfully backwards into parking lots, and everyone got out in a hurry to return to the mundane. The wake washed over their memories. They forgot the wall of water. They forgot the resignation of simply not being fast enough or young enough or old enough, the children, to escape. Other walls, those of the town of concrete and stone, grew from the wake of the reversed wave, a wake of pure nourishment and creation. Folks on the high ground cheered as they watched the wave place back their history. The wave washed over the power plant's last, cooling them down, putting the workers in their blue jumpsuits back into their chairs in front of the buzzing and beeping consoles that surely every power plant must have. Consoles reading reactors 1, 2, 3, 4, A-OK, in big Roman letters. As panic rushed out, daydreams about after-hour beers and mistresses and playing with their children over the weekend all flooded back into the workers' heads. Hundreds of kilometers away, I tell her, in Tokyo, residents returned in hordes. They came from Osaka and Kyoto, Nagoya, Fukuoka, Shizuoka. Foreigners flew back with their families from Australia and Italy, England, Hong Kong, China, America, from far away, looking through a telescope. I saw the microscopic faces of expat French embassy workers subtly shift from mortal fear to resigned ennui. Japanese galloped backwards to shops and dramatically placed onigiris on the shelves. Loaves of bread were overflowing into the aisle. Convenience stores were buying the bags of rice from every man, woman, and child. The whole orchestration was quite a sight. An entire populace transformed into the anti-thespians of recovery, everyone sucking the drama out of the city air, exhaling normalcy. Houses shed their piles of batteries, the teepees of toilet paper, their candles, their flashlights. Millions were back up from the streets into their office buildings, removing their silly white protective helmets. Hundreds of thousands crawled out from under the desks. File cabinets righted themselves, blind seats smacking windows. Shards of broken glass flew up and landed as whole bottles atop desks. Swaying buildings came to a standstill. The tip of Tokyo Tower straightened itself. Back in the small villages, the violent rivers of crushing water were reduced to streams, trickles, and then nothing as I pulled with all my might, dragging that wave back deep down into the blackness of the ocean, past the whale, schools of curious fish, into the ocean floor. I followed it down. I chased that fucker into the ground. I bottled it up. It's in my shampoo. Don't touch the shampoo. I went deeper into the earth and I took the plates that were antsy and I let them move, but I dampened their guttural yell. I soaked up their vibrations with my chest. The thick wool of my sweater ate up the 9.0 worth of quake. I soaked it up, but I let the aftershocks through. They were okay. I knew they wouldn't cause harm. All of the death and destruction, the fear, the ambiguity of the politicians and the power company, those ridiculous helicopters, the anxiety over not hearing from loved ones, the scarred hearts, the lost photos, kimonos, and crushing word. I took it all. I grabbed it all. It's right here in that bag, sandwiched between my underwear. He was right, the inspector. He was right to mark my ticket, to single me out. This is the most dangerous bag here, but you can open it if you want. It doesn't matter anymore because it's over. She fumbled, trying to close the zipper. Here, let me help you with that. You're good to go, she said cheerfully, then adding, thanks for the chat. Had I been talking to her? I couldn't remember. Most of the week came at best in fits and starts. I looked down. My hands were shaking, but the ground wasn't. It was a reversal I could live with. Thank you. A couple of my friends friends are doing an amazing job with this project called Bikes for Japan. They live in Tokyo. They're going around. They're collecting bikes, basically to bring up to the shelters. There's still over 100,000 people living in shelters in Tohoku. They're going around Tokyo on the weekends with trucks, collecting bikes that people are donating. If you could tweet out, it's bikesforjapan.org. Shout out, that'd be awesome. They've done a great job. They collected like 225 bikes last weekend. They're on track to do another 200 this weekend. It's been amazing. It's been a really wonderful project, seeing the kids getting these bikes and sort of the families getting these bikes. They've lost everything. No cars, no transportation, stuck in the shelters. Being able to give them a way to get around and shop and just sort of feel a little bit of normalcy is pretty cool.
Great. Thank you again, Craig.